Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Funky Marketing Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about important things about organic growth and how ActiveCampaign builds organic growth engines to propel their team to 1 billion in ARR. And please join me in welcoming Casey Hill to the podcast. Casey, welcome.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me. I was telling the people here in my office, I'm going to have Casey from ActiveCampaign on the podcast. And they was like, oh man, that's a huge thing. And I'm like, yeah, man, we're going to talk about different stuff. And people seem excited. So maybe you can tell us a little bit for those that are not familiar with you, with ActiveCampaign, what you're doing and why we are talking about this here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my name's Casey. I've been in the kind of software industry for over a decade now, specifically kind of focused on the MarTech space. So kind of marketing software, marketing related products. That's where it's been kind of my career. And besides working at software companies, I've also done a lot of consulting with series companies and with VC funds, McKinsey, Blackrock, and a handful of others about SaaS pricing, SaaS churn, all sorts of different trends in our industry, sales-led motions, partner-led motions, all that kind of fun stuff. So this is kind of the world that I've lived in for a long time. And I recently made the jump from running growth at a startup to heading up organic growth at ActiveCampaign, a company that we're trying to build towards $1 billion a year. Not there yet, but we're working towards, that's our next kind of milestone goal. And underneath that umbrella of organic, there's a lot of different pieces. So we focus on a lot of different long tail levers, everything from guesting on podcasts to running channels like LinkedIn and kind of having a concerted multi-prong approach that I think we might kind of unpack and get into today.
Yeah, what was that switch? What's the feeling like going from startup to sort of like more of a scale up? Is it ActiveCampaign the scale up? Where does it fit? I think yes, right?
Yeah, I mean, the company's valued at about $3 billion plus. So it's definitely got some size in terms of exact definition. I'm not sure. It's roughly about 1,000 people. But yeah, I always tell folks there's pros and cons to both sides, right? In startups, you are often juggling a lot of plates. You have a lot of different responsibilities that you're always doing congruently. You're having to switch gears and pivot constantly. And you tend to always be up against resourcing challenges. You always want to try more things, but you're always confined by the budget and confined by the amount of personnel. With larger companies, you get more resourcing, which is great. You allow more specialization because people can really just lean in and focus on specific target areas, and you have enough folks to have that bandwidth. On the flip side, though, there can be more bureaucracy. There can be more layers. You're kind of getting approvals. You're working through multiple teams. There's lots of stakeholders. Right? So before, if it was just like you have an idea, you go execute. Now you have to work with lots of other teams to kind of see that happen. I mean, one of the interesting changes, I was running growth and we just had a small, tight content team. Coming to ActiveCampaign, we have a lifecycle marketing team, a corporate marketing team, an affiliate marketing team, a paid marketing team, an organic marketing team. So we have all of these different kind of organizational hierarchies that exist under those folks. And so there's good parts about it. There's tougher parts about it. But I'm really excited about the ability to create impact on a much larger scale. One of the things that's really exciting to me about working at a company like ActiveCampaign with 175,000 plus customers all around the world is you have that ability to really impact the industry in a meaningful way. You have, actually a substantial market share, and you can really make those changes that impact how marketing automation kind of functions as a space and as an industry. And I find that exciting. So it's been fun. I've been here for a few months and we've been having a good time.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. I love it especially because my background before I started Funky Marketing was in an agency focused on performance and most of all marketing automation, email marketing, website personalization. At the time we organized even I think that it was the first ever online conference and conference overall, like both online and offline, tackling marketing automation. Right. And it was 2017, 18, pretty advanced for this region at the time. That's where I become familiar with ActiveCampaign and all those stuff. So we use a lot of different tools, depending on the clients. It was all around the place. But tell me one thing. Usually when I talk to the people about growth, about things, they always jump in and tell me how the opportunities are in the advertising part. right? How we're going to use advertising, how we're going to use different things. Your focus is on the organic growth. And kind of, I would like to maybe, start with tackling the opportunities, inside the organic, because a lot of people don't talk about it. They say, okay, our advertising is the shortest way to get to the customers. But I always say, maybe it's not, depending on who you are as a company, how much of a budget you have. Like inviting somebody on a podcast, on a conversation, can be the shortest way to do it, right? So there are different ways to kind of focus on growth.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think part of this is a lot of what has conventionally been called demand creation is actually kind of demand capture. So, a lot of paid ads historically, right? They're capturing existing demand. These are kind of like bottom of the funnel folks typically who see an ad that compares your tool versus another one or someone else and it pushes them over the line. I think that there's absolutely a place for paid. And I'm actually, when we get into LinkedIn, I'll discuss how we use organic and paid together for, I think, a really good synergy. We'll kind of unpack that a little bit. But I think the opportunity for organic is to actually, genuinely create demand. Meaning that when you explain an issue, when you add meaningful insight, and the word value added is so kind of cliche today because it's kind of everyone just uses this kind of for everything. But the idea is when you actually instruct and teach and contribute additional insights into how someone can do something, that has the ability to actually create demand. And I think that's one of the opportunities when you have an owned asset, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's you building a presence on a social channel, you have this opportunity to build that actual demand creation engine, which I think is exciting. The other component of it is that I think growth, long tail growth specifically, is something that is much more lends itself to the organic side than the paid side, right? You turn off those ads and suddenly that momentum that you've been building is just boom, it's an off switch, right? Whereas when you create an asset, when you have something you own, that generally grows over time. And there's a lot of different organic. It could be SEO, it could be your podcast from day one to 2 years later. But all of those have this cumulative effect, which I think is really important for an organization, especially as you grow. So I think that right now, everyone's calling it the year of efficient SaaS, right? And they're talking about all these headwinds and customer acquisition costs are going up. And we're seeing new customer acquisition is facing more and more headwinds in the software space, especially. This is talked about quite a bit. Payback periods are getting longer. All of these different variables lend themselves to organizations taking a step back and saying, what can we do organically? What kind of footprint can we create organically that is going to allow us to pull down those high customer acquisition costs and be operating more efficiently as an organization? And so I think that's the opportunity. So it's been exciting to kind of hop in and try some of these, the playbook, if you will, that I implemented from a startup standpoint, taking that over into a company with a little bit more scale and seeing how that kind of functions. And it's gone quite well, which is the good news. And so it's been cool to see how at a larger organization with more resource and with more people to kind of pull into initiatives, we've been able to do things like create Operation LinkedIn, which has almost 50 people from our organization in that channel where we're doing coaching and we're training and people are sharing content. And we've kind of created incentive structures and we celebrate folks. We have something called the 10K Club. So if you get 10,000 impressions in a week, we celebrate you. And so taking people that are basically non-existent on LinkedIn and getting them to these first milestones is really exciting. And I think motivates sometimes people, they see LinkedIn, they're interested, but they're getting, 1,000 impressions a week and they just feel like it's unattainable to make it a real engine. And so one of my favorite things is to take someone on the team. We had someone who had 500 impressions, then went to 1,200, then went to 5,000, then went to 9,000, then went to 12,000. And that was over the course of 4 weeks, just that jump up. And so that's really exciting to show people, look, in 1 month, you can go from under 1,000 to over 10,000. That's how fast this can change if you follow those best practices, if you use actual firsthand experiences, if you use data, if you get into all of those best practices, it can become really impactful a lot quicker than I think people tend to think. They think, I have to build this big following, and only if I have this big following will I be able to be successful. And I've definitely seen that that's not the case.
Yeah, I totally agree. I even had in Funky Marketing the guy who had 78,000 followers at the time. He didn't get as much, right? from that standpoint, but it was an interesting experiment to kind of try it. He got a lot of those when he figured out how to be inside the news that LinkedIn was sharing at the time, to write the article, and it got featured in the LinkedIn news, and then he got the followers. Right.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it got us, there are some things that we can figure out, those kind of like on which thing LinkedIn is focused on. We get through that, and then we grow quickly from that standpoint. But will it get us more customers? That's a different thing that we need to figure out, right, from that perspective. And I love what you said about LinkedIn. That's kind of the thing that I've been also doing with companies, kind of creating a hub inside the company where we actually, work with people, teach them how to use LinkedIn, how to add their personal goals also to the company goals, and basically, be with them every step of the way to kind of create depending on what the goal is. Sometimes it's, they need to be more visible to hire more people. Sometimes it's, they need to get into the more conversation so they can sell more. All depends different things. But tell me more about that. Let's start with that thing, because basically the growth is creating the growth loops, the things that you can work on, and in time they can grow, and basically one by one it gets you to the milestone that you set up.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first thing I would say when you're kind of mobilizing your team is one of the biggest misconceptions, and one of the kind of problems that I see working with a lot of teams is they bring their team to LinkedIn and they just post very, what again I would call bottom of the funnel content, meaning like, my tool solves XYZ problem. It's almost like they're regurgitating blog content. And a way to kind of think about content is you almost have degrees. I did a post about this a while back where I talked about 5 degrees of content. And so your first and second degree content, these tend to be things that are very directly related to what you do, right? So that someone who's following and they already know about your brand and they're kind of just on the fence, and you pull them over with that specific feature, that specific use case. So there's a place for that, but that's serving very high intent. It's serving a small slice of very high intent folks. Then you get to third degree content. Now, I'll use ActiveCampaign as an example. We're this marketing automation company. So first and second degree content are really focused around like how AC is solving this specific problem. Now, once we get to third degree content, we're talking more about, say, email as a channel. How can email marketing be an effective channel? Or maybe we're talking about deliverability, right? So we're now abstracted a little bit farther away. And that's the content that conventionally gets known as like thought leadership, right? You're trying to build authority in the space that relates to your product. But because you're going a little bit higher level, you have the advantage that it appeals to a much larger audience. So someone who's using a different tool right now, but maybe a year from now, they might want to make a switch, or they get frustrated, or there's some sort of problem, or they're looking to upgrade. Now you're top of mind, right? Because they always throw around 95% of buyers in B2B are out of market at that given time, right? Only 5% are in. So there's a huge value in having that third degree content. Fourth degree content takes a step even back from that, and it's kind of more general business related, right? You'll see some of these people that talk about building like a media channel. And that idea of building a media channel is folks that, let's say like in my example for ActiveCampaign, if I was talking about something that was like return to work policy, or should people be able to have side hustles, that doesn't have anything to do with ActiveCampaign. It's still business related, but that would be what I would call fourth degree content. So now you're casting a really wide net, try to grab as many eyes as possible, but you're losing some of that relevance. So there's some trade-offs. And then fifth degree content is what I call kind of like personal. Sometimes people hop on LinkedIn and they share what's going on with their family or whatnot. And look, some people are really successful with that, right? Some of the top influencers will share personal stories and that humanizes them. But what you normally find is you want to have a balance across those degrees, right? If you are doing all first or second degree, especially, you're going to run into problems. So circling back to mobilizing your team, the first thing you want to do is you want to empower people to be able to post about what they know, right? That's the biggest mistake. Repurpose this content instead of saying, you're a salesperson, right? I did a training workshop recently with my sales teams, and they were talking about like, oh, well, should we talk about deliverability? Should we talk about this, that? And I said, I would start with, you guys have 30 people on your team. The people I was chatting with in this workshop were some of the top performers. I'm like, if you guys are doing 5x as much business as the people on the bottom, like, what are you doing? What do those conversations look like? What kind of discovery questions are you asking? How are you closing so much more business? I'm like, that's interesting. And there's a lot of other sales folks that would like to know the specifics, not the general, like, oh, we ask discovery questions to learn about their problems. That's filler. But get into the actual specifics and talk about, you can take the client's name out of it, but talk about actual deals. What went down in that deal? How did you win them? What was the pushback that they gave you? And each department, right, as you go across the org from product to marketing to engineering to sales should be different because they all have different expertise. But the one thing I start with is empowering people to talk about what they actually know and not putting such tight guidelines that people immediately feel like, okay, I can't do this because I'm just reposting content. It feels kind of soulless. And it takes that excitement and motivation away from them as well. So that's one of the first core pieces. The second thing is employees respond to incentives. I can't tell you the amount of teams that I work with that just go to their teams and they're like, we would love for you to be active on LinkedIn. But it's not related to their KPIs. It's not related to any of their central job roles. You're going to go tell your engineers at your company that you want them to post on LinkedIn when they know that it has nothing to do with how they're being paid and compensated. Like, it's just not a realistic way to operate. Maybe you activate executives at the company that way, but that's literally one small slice. If you're trying to get wider buy-in within the organization, you have to think about incentives and build a system that rewards people for a behavior that you want to create. And if you as a company aren't willing to do that, you're not willing to incorporate it into KPIs, you're not willing to have a structure or system, I don't see that working. And most of the teams that I work with, and I've worked with a lot of teams around building LinkedIn as a kind of an engine for an organization, the ones that win are the ones that actually systematize and have real KPIs and visibility and accountability around it. That's like your stage one to set that foundation. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, one more thing is, are they aware of the benefits that they will have for them personally, right? If they become active, and this is not something that you develop as when your boss tells you to do it, right? It's something that you realize on your own. And this is also one of the obstacles that I often see is, you need to have the right team if you want to do that in place, at least the leaders, right? At least like 5 people that will take that and basically help the others. And also one more thing, which is for me, usually when I do it, this is the, if you're going to make it or break it, is how much is the leader, the person that people look as the leader. It can be the marketing leader, it can be the CEO, no matter who it is, but the most important person for them that they look up to is he or she involved in it or no, meaning helping them how to do it, giving them feedback, sharing experiences, those kind of things. And when they see, that person actually does it, maybe I can also try it. And then, the thing that you explained, the most active and, extroverts start doing it, then the others will see, maybe I can try it out. So when they see, I got 500 people seeing my post. Woo, that's enough. Then, then you get them to the next step, and it builds up on that. But tell me, what I'm seeing is that you don't need more than 10 people posting every day. Basically, you can have 10 people posting every day and like maybe 10 more posting from time to time, couple of times a week. That already makes you more visible than 90% of the companies on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more the merrier, right? So the more active people that you can pull in, the merrier. But I totally agree. I mean, few companies have 10 people that are consistently posting. Most companies end up getting 1 or 2 kind of thought leaders for the brand that are out there. And the challenge that I see is when you only have 1 or 2 people, you're very vulnerable. Meaning, and I say this even for myself, I'm the main point person, right, on LinkedIn. I normally, somewhere between 150 to 250,000 impressions per week. And I always tell them, if I leave, I don't want the system to fall apart. The whole thing that I'm trying to build, so is that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, that our company continues to grow and use this channel moving forward. And I think that is what creates resilience and sustainability within a channel, is when you don't have that point of failure. And the majority of companies do have that point of failure. So this is also part of why it's so important to share knowledge. I will always like pin top posts, so we have people can constantly see kind of what are the guidelines, what are the best practices, what kind of content is winning, and have that present so the people who want to educate themselves can. But you make an excellent point too about the importance of the personal benefit. One of the beautiful things about building authority on these social channels is that the followers stay with you, right? That credibility, that authority, that industry expertise stays with you. And if you move companies in 4 years, you have that opportunity. And as someone who's heavily involved in consulting, all of this, I tell people, all of this started from LinkedIn. All of this started from, whatever it was 6 years ago when GLG, which is like kind of a middleman organization for consulting, reached out about a gig in the marketing automation space. I took that. I then got connected with Mavens. I then got connected with Guidepoint, all of these other middleman organizations. And through time and doing well on those consultations, I started to get the firms directly to work with me. So these companies like GLG and Guidepoint and Mavens, they basically connect you to a lot of these firms who are looking for very specific subject experts. But then once I built that credibility to a certain extent and people saw that I had been doing a lot of work consulting in the SaaS space, I started to then have these organizations contact me directly about insights around specific investments. And so all of that stemmed from LinkedIn and my presence that I had there and the views that I had accumulated on that channel. So absolutely has a tremendous personal benefit as well for folks that are willing to sustainably work on it and build that authority over time.
Yeah, same here, kind of the similar story. It just shows a different way afterwards. But like in the first year when I started Funky Marketing, it was like 7 of us, 6 of us were creating content because we're a group of marketers mostly. And I had the onboarding process when each person goes and learns how to do the copywriting and write the way we do. And so they were all talking about different stuff, but before they start posting, they get the feedback from everybody in the company, right? So they get encouraged, and when they post it, the same people are already excited about the content. They know, so we saw that post, it's a great one. Did you post it? Let's react to it, and it kind of goes up from there. And what is kind of interesting, I don't know if I talked about it or no, like in 2020, we all know Yag from SaaS Prints. Basically, he gathered me, Nick Bennett, I don't know, a lot of people who are now like in top 100 B2B marketers. We didn't know each other. He just, created a group and said, talk to each other. Right. So we started talking to each other, and it's kind of nice to see, from talking to each other, then reacting to our own posts, supporting each other, being guests on each other podcasts and, creating content with each other. And now when you see like 3-4 years later, like we are all acknowledged by the other people by the work that we are doing. So that's kind of nice. And it always starts with a person who said, hey, let's connect those people. You had also a nice campaign that is tackling actually the voice of the customer, which is always a good thing. And I want to hear more about it because there are different ways to do it. And I heard before like companies doing it in a different way, but I want to see what you guys are up to.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of one of the ideas when I came to LinkedIn is we started to think about layering on a channel. So I actually got inspired from Aircall. Aircall basically shared an example of their CMO was at SaaStr and he gave a talk. And at that talked about how they were 5% off of their end of year goal. They were trying to figure out a way to plug it. They pumped a bunch of paid in to try to plug that gap. It didn't work. And ultimately what did work was they tried to do a bunch of concurrent plays in the same spot. So in their case, it was like geographically located. They went to like New York and they put ads on photo booths and they put ads in the subway, but they also did digital ads to people in one specific area. They also hosted events in one specific area. The idea was to try a whole bunch of different plays in the same spot. So I kind of am trying to take that same ethos to LinkedIn. So one side of it is what we've been spending most of this time talking about, which is thought leadership. You're trying to build authority. Why are you a trusted person in your space? Where someone who was looking for marketing automation or conversion rate optimization would come and say, oh, Casey knows about that. Where does Casey work? ActiveCampaign. And that would be something that might drive some business. But the other side is actually moving down funnel. Remember those degrees. So I said, what if we could get our customers to do the first and second degree content, right? Like I don't want to be doing all this first and second degree content because that seems promotional. But if my customer comes in and says, I switched to ActiveCampaign from MailChimp because of XYZ, or I have this really good use case, that is great because it comes from a customer. So we created a campaign And we started by going to our highest NPS or highest advocacy folks, people that were super active and we knew were really happy with the platform. And we started there and we essentially said, look, I did a personal email for myself and reached out to folks and said, I don't want our messaging to all just be coming from ActiveCampaign, right? I want your stories. I want to understand what's working for you. So I'm starting this voice of the customer, and I would love if you would be able to come out, do these posts, and in exchange, we have a pretty big team here at ActiveCampaign. And what we'll do for you is we will follow your account, we will amplify this post, we will reshare it, we'll repost it, we'll comment on it. And that was where we started. And so for that high advocacy group, started off really well. We were getting 10 plus customer posts per week, which was great because before we had maybe like one every other week, like it wasn't as common. So we got a ton of engagement and we had some of those advocates reaching back out to us and saying, that was my best post of the year, which was awesome to see that we were able, through the mechanism of our company, hop in, give them engagement, and give them that reach. Now, that worked great for a select group. But as you can imagine, if you're just kind of relying on goodwill to say, like, we would love it if you share your story, only so many people are that passionate that they're gonna hop in. So the next wave we did with Voice of the Customers, we kind of took a step back and we said, besides just straight money, which feels not right, I don't like the idea of like, I'm going to pay you to post about us. I said, what can we offer as an organization that would contribute value? And so we actually created a list. We literally wrote out all the different things, the expertises of our team. And I ran a course business before, so we put in like my course, like all of these different things that we potentially could give to people. And then we literally reached out to folks and we had a what you can do for ActiveCampaign, what we can do for you, right? So it was like super open-ended, and we're like, we would love to get more content on LinkedIn about your experience. We kept it super open-ended. We don't want to tell people like what they should post about. We just want to hear about your experience and bring it to the platform, right? In exchange, we can follow your social channels. We can engage in your content. We can share your podcast around with our team so people can listen to it and leave reviews. Like, we started to go through all those different things that we could do in exchange for people. And that's when it really had that inflection point and took off, because a lot of people were like, yeah, like I like ActiveCampaign. Plus I see this big benefit for myself in getting this exposure, win-win situation. And we then mobilized a lot of folks through that. So that was kind of this voice of the customer initiative. So now we not only were having dozens of people from our team post, that kind of third degree content style typically, but now we had customers posting that first and second degree. And then we actually had a third arm, which was our paid team got involved. Our paid team started to run ads. But what they did, which I'm really excited about, is instead of running a lot of the conventional ads, they ran what we call thought leadership ads. So thought leadership ads are essentially a promoted post. So why I really like this is that it has this opportunity to change how we view ads in a very noisy landscape. Like, what if ads could actually be valuable? What if ads actually contributed something intrinsically in and of themselves, right? Ads are usually just a push. Go do this thing. But remember, as we talked about before, the problem with that is it's very bottom of the funnel. The ad that pops up that says ActiveCampaign is the best marketing automation in the space, it's like that only speaks to like a very, very tiny niche of people who already are strongly thinking about ActiveCampaign, and they're like, okay, I need to go check it out. But if we provide, like, one of the promoted posts as an example I did was I used to do a lot of deliverability consultations. So I would hop on with teams, I'd break down their whole flow, I'd go through best practice. So I literally just shared the notes from one of those $500 sessions. And I put it in. Obviously, I took out the client's information, but I put in that all of the stuff we talked about, the recommendations I gave, the specific insights around frequency, calls to action, all those pieces. So that was like a genuinely valuable piece of content that instead of that normal ad environment could contribute value. And so we did that. It's been exciting. The click-through rates on those are phenomenal. We see 7, 9, even 12% click-through rate on some of those thought leadership ads. And we've seen just great velocity with this three-pronged approach. And I am increasingly becoming a strong advocate of this layering approach. Or if you're going to try a channel, give thought to not just what's one way for you to test out, but how can you have a multi-pronged approach? I think that is a way that you build real sustainable energy on that platform.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you laid it out nicely, first step, second step, and the third step. And it's maybe people don't know about the thought leadership ads. They're kind of like the newest one on LinkedIn. but the newest ones are also always the best performing one, right? You get the most value for the price. So from that perspective, it's nice that you got into it. I mean, the alternative is that you distribute the ads inside the feed and basically, do the content which is, more of like middle of the funnel from that way. But when you do it like this, you make it more personal. You can share basically the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel in one segment of the advertising, right? Through the different people and different approaches, and with basically different creatives, right? One can share the video, other one can use the infographics, the photos, the third one can actually lay down the structure inside the text post, and you have a lot of variety inside just one campaign on LinkedIn, basically through that. But also what I'm seeing is you get to see the results right away when you post it organically, right? And if it performs well, then you say, this is the post that I can also promote through the thought leadership content. And that's basically how you know it's already working. Let me give it a boost.
Yeah, and one other totally, and one other cool angle is that any post where someone in their job description has your company set through present and it's within 3 months is promotable. So the other interesting angle here for everyone listening is you can actually promote a partner's post. You can go to a partner, remember that voice of the customer. You can go to their post and you can essentially say, look, as long as you put, like in our case, it'd be ActiveCampaign partner. As long as you put that in your job history and you set that to present, I now have the ability to see that when I go to select a post for thought leadership ads, and I can then choose that partner post. So that's another creative thing that we've been testing out is if we have a great advocacy post where someone posts a really good positioning, what about instead of it coming from us, it came from an outside agency, an outside source, and the other side loves it because they're getting free impressions. Who doesn't want an extra 20,000, 30,000 impressions a week on their content? So it's really this win-win situation. And I think something that we'll continue to do even more. We've tested a couple cases, but most of it has been with our own employees' content. But I think there's something there that is really interesting. So just a best practice. And for folks who are looking to potentially do thought leadership ads, just a couple things that I've learned on this. You can't do video, unfortunately. You can't do carousels, unfortunately. I've had a couple carousels.
I forgot about that. Nice reminder.
Yeah, I've had a couple where I was like so bummed because like, oh, I know this carousel would have done so well, but no video, no carousels, and it has to be within 3 months as far as I've seen in terms of the posts that are selectable. So there are a couple limitations or restrictions to it. But yeah, like I said, I've seen great results and impact from it from just testing even just a few months with it.
Yeah, I see. Justin Lowe is doing great because he has this post like at least once a month, and he shared, okay, so this is how much we invested in our ads. This is the structure. These are the results, and then basically he advertises that post, and he boosts his personal branding. He also gives the results. He also gives the way they structure the ads, the way they do it, and they do just that. They sell LinkedIn advertising, right? So from that perspective, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, totally. No, I think LinkedIn is, I think the thing with LinkedIn is that conventionally speaking, for SMB focused businesses, it can be tough, right? I know that back in the day, like CXL produced a thing that basically said, like, if your lifetime value of a customer is not at least $5,000, I wouldn't run LinkedIn ads. And that's because of how expensive those clicks can get. I don't know about that exact figure, but I do think that there's some truth to the fact that if you're selling a $20 a month product, I think it will be a challenge on a channel like LinkedIn. For example, my last startup, Bonjoro, we didn't do a lot of advertising on LinkedIn. It just the unit economics of it didn't make a lot of sense for such a down funnel product. But we still did a lot of posting. We still did the other sides of that, right? The thought leadership, the voice of the customer style of content, I think can perform really well. But the more different styles or prongs of attack that you can layer in, I think the better.
I totally agree. And, thanks for sharing that. Like basically you gave people the whole outline and how they can use LinkedIn in a different way. That's exactly what I mentioned, how to create layers, and one continues when the first one ends, then the third one starts after the second one ends. Basically, they all complement each other and create the growth. So that's kind of what growth is all about. Tell me, what's kind of the next step? How did you plan all that out? What's coming after this?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of LinkedIn specifically, and then I can kind of speak to some things beyond that that I have interest in. For LinkedIn specifically, I'm actually in the process of working on a LinkedIn competition that me and a handful of other companies are going to host. I'm really excited about it. We're essentially going to be looking for mini lessons on ideas, on concepts. So it could be around deliverability, it could be around attribution, but we're going to have people present it in a creative format. So it could be a video, it could be an animation, it could be a wrapped video, like all sorts of different things. We're going to have the mechanism be open-ended, but I'm really excited. There's so many award shows that exist out there today that provide awards, and like that's cool to get visibility, and I have nothing against award shows, but I like this idea of what if we're going to give awards too, but they're going to be to actual lessons and content and real takeaways. And so I'm really excited about this concept because I think it has this opportunity to not only highlight people, which is important, but highlight really good lessons that are actually teaching the most valuable things to people, and also doing it in a creative way. Because I think most of us, when we look at social today, we see those people in our feeds. We see the Tom Bostons, we see all these other folks who have that really creative edge, right? Hockey Stack and Obey do a great job of this. Like, there's a handful of people that I know in my space, in SaaS, who are really creative. And I think that helps grab eyes. And if you can combine being really creative with a genuinely good lesson, that to me is the winning combination. So we're really excited about this idea to surface more of those insights. So that's another layer that we're thinking of doing on LinkedIn. And I'm really excited to give more information on that as it kind of comes together. But in addition and beyond that, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is partnerships. I've been involved in partnerships for a lot of brands for a long time. And you see like there's this growth of the near-bound movement where more people are talking about near-bound. One of the challenges that I've had with partnerships conventionally is that it often has this very transactional feel. A lot of times someone will say, oh, I'll give you a plug on my podcast, or I'll give you a plug in my newsletter, and it'll pop up and the person will open up by saying sponsored by XYZ, right? And I don't have anything against people doing conventional sponsorships. Like, I get that. But to me, it never feels like this person is like a true advocate of this product. When I hear those things, I'm like, okay, that person paid them some money to get some exposure. Like, again, I'm not hating on them, but it doesn't to me strike as genuine brand evangelism or support. So I've been giving a lot of thought to what could a true brand evangelist program look like how Nike signs an athlete. When they sign an athlete, that athlete is only going to be wearing those shoes, right? They're not going to go be wearing some other brand's shoes. They're going to be doing commercials. There's this whole like bundle that comes with it. So I'm thinking about how we could bring that into my industry, right? Into the world of marketing automation. Is there a way to bring on these real evangelists who are going to be using the product, sharing about stuff organically from firsthand experience? And so that's been a really interesting. We're in the early stages of this. I've been having lots of interviews with folks and interesting conversations. And sometimes you'll have an amazing fit person. And then at the end, and they'll be happy to promote. They'll say, yeah, we'd love to do this. We'd be happy to promote, but I'm not going to use the product. And that's an instant no from us. I'm like, I'm sorry. Even if you have a perfect fit, even if everything else lines up, it doesn't feel authentic to me for someone to like be saying ActiveCampaign is the greatest tool, and then they're sending an email from HubSpot. Like that doesn't add up, right? And so for us, we're genuinely looking at people that actually use the product, that genuinely understand it, that are genuinely getting value. And then from there, we can kind of build this advocacy program with them. But I'm really excited. And I think this idea to have a longer term deal with people that really understand the product is going to create much more relatable and ultimately persuasive advocacy, because it's coming from an actual place of understanding versus just kind of a transactional plug. And so that's another lever that I'm really interested to look at towards the end of this year and into 2024.
Yeah, I love that. First, let me get back a step to the LinkedIn and the competition. And I really like how you think. So that's basically a step up from what we were doing. I mean, we as Funky Marketing, then Chili Piper did some of the more or less the similar things, creating a competition on a LinkedIn company page. We basically did it so we can give a chance to the people working in the marketing space to get to know each other, right? And it was like 77 or 8 marketers suggested by the people that everybody could suggest somebody. And then basically we just started to create the polls where they can compete with each other. We gave the awards, the best 20, gave an interview, so they got a little bit of PR. Basically, winner decided where we're gonna invest certain amount of money to help somebody. It's really nice campaign, a nice overview. It gave us also the visibility. But this thing that you're talking about is the next level, and the preparation and everything that gets into it. It gets more complicated, but the results are going to be that much bigger from that standpoint. And so I really like how you think about it. And that's always a good thing. And I think about partnership. Look, let me give you something. I was thinking, because like here in the Balkans, basically when people say B2B marketing, they tag me, everybody, because modern B2B marketing still didn't come here, and I'm kind of the first one opening the space, and there are a couple of more people doing the great work. And I was thinking how I should, put the B2B marketing, the modern one, the way we should do it, in the front. And you kind of got the inspiration from Nike. I, for some reason, got the inspiration from Adidas and their Originals campaign, where they have 3 different types of shoes, like superstars. Then have what do they call them, like Samba, and then the third one, and they all have like the history. So the idea is to kind of gather a group of people when they all have their background stories. Some of them were like singers, some of them were journalists, some of them were something else, and tell those stories, right? And basically use kind of the B2B originals in the Balkan space, kind of go with that. I mean, you have another thing which I don't have, and that is like the brand and the company and the product that they are using, which is kind of like brings them more closer to the same goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of ways you can spin it, right? And there's a lot of different successful influencer campaigns. So I by no means mean to indicate to people that you can't have a successful influencer campaign if someone isn't a firsthand user of a product. But I think that for me, thinking about how I could bring, like, one of the central goals was around that authenticity standpoint and trying to bring that trust component through authenticity. And so for me, that usership felt like a really key cog of that wheel for this kind of evangelist style of angle. And also the other thing too that I think even across influencer campaigns can be important is extending the timeline a little bit, right? Sometimes it's not the first touch, right? It happens at the 8th touch. And that only can happen is if you're willing to say, hey, let's have this be a quarter long or a year long, right? You expand that time frame. That gives more opportunity for that to really gel and for that really to associate back with your brand versus like, I'm going to post about you guys one time and pay me $2,000, just that. Those types, for me at least, I've never seen be incredibly successful. Maybe in like e-commerce, there might be ways that would work, but in software, I have not seen that be a winning recipe.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's the thing that's B2C coming to B2B, right? That's how I see it. All the things that you are doing and implementing, I see that as a B2C coming to B2B, right? We use the power of the real people building the software, working in software companies, the people that we are selling to with that software. So that's kind of the power that we have. And all those people have emotions, feelings, sense of creativity. And basically, from what I'm hearing, is you're using all that to kind of get the company to the goal that you set up to achieve.
Yep, absolutely.
And I mean, hats off. I didn't hear many people speak and do the way you do it, right? From that perspective, it's I'm delighted to hear like a fresh of new air and somebody who's doing things differently. I mean, this is Funky Marketing Podcast, so you're the perfect guest for that.
I love it. Yeah, I'm trying to experiment as much as I can. And I think I'm constantly inspired. Like LinkedIn just is one conduit or channel that I can learn from people, but I'm constantly seeing creative things and then resharing those with my team and sharing them with my marketing space and say, I love how they did this, or it's really cool how they did this thing. And that's another thing I think is really important. At SaaStr, there was several CMOs who talked about this concept, but they talk about a concept of shareability, right? Are you actively thinking about the shareability of your content? So once again, going back to those degrees, if you're doing a whole bunch of first and second degree content, it often is not going to have a ton of shareability, right? But if you're able to take that step back into third degree content, maybe even sometimes fourth degree content, that can have a lot of shareability. And so I constantly am looking at content that inspires me and I share it back. And then that gets me thinking, right? Like, okay, of the last 20 things that I've shared to my own channel, like, what are the commonalities between that, right? Usually they do something kind of creative in the approach. They have a really compelling hook. They have a great open. They cover an issue in a really interesting or novel way. And so I think that as we produce content as a team, give thought to that specifically. Ask yourself, like, is this inherently shareable? Why or why not? And I think, one of my early mentors was someone named Patrick Campbell from ProfitWell, who went on to sell his company for over $200 million. We used to meet on a monthly basis. And during those meetings, he was kind of coaching and advising and talking through these things. And he was an expert at that shareability. He went to, I think it was SaaS Talk, and he was on stage and he just repeated the word churn the entire talk, but behind him, the slides were playing the actual content. And I remember when that dropped, I immediately shared it with my team. I'm like, no way he did this. This is so crazy. Like, you guys have to see, he literally just repeats the word churn. But that video, I talked to him later about it. It got thousands and thousands of shares, and they made a ton of business and pipeline from that video because it was such a novel way to present the content. Again, he wasn't just saying churn. The actual content was playing behind him, so there was the actual structure. But he was delivering something that was so much of a pattern disrupt that people stopped and said, okay, this is crazy. And even if they didn't like it, they would probably still share it with their team and say, this is so dumb. And as a byproduct, it got massive reach. So I think that's another good takeaway for us all to be going through that test, that litmus test of, is this shareable content?
Exactly. Love that. And I love Patrick and the content that, not only him, but the team were creating. And even him nowadays, I think I listened to 10 days ago, his episode with Lenny Racinski on a podcast when he shared a lot of different stuff that related to the bootstrapping of a company and startups and the growth and, those kind of things. So tell me and tell the people who are listening where they can find more information about you, obviously active campaigns and all the things that you are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn, I'm talking a lot about LinkedIn today. So folks can find me there. I post very frequently. So just Casey Hill, the one who works at ActiveCampaign. Feel free to follow there if you're looking for more kind of firsthand growth experiences, things in that conversion rate optimization, SaaS, email marketing, those types of worlds. And you can also drop me an email directly. My email is chill, CHILL, @activecampaign.com. So if you have questions either on the stuff we're talking about in this podcast today or about ActiveCampaign as a tool, feel free to drop me a line and I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thanks, man. And thanks for spending time with me and all the people listening. I think most of the people listening to the podcast are based in the US for some reason. That's good. Mm-hmm. But the other one are UK and Germany, which is kind of interesting. And then the Balkans. So a lot of great diversity in the crowd, most people in the B2B space. So I think we covered a nice ground and shared with them a lot of insights and strategies that probably they didn't hear from anybody else. Man, thank you for sharing. And I'm happy to welcome you another time in 2 or 3 months to see where you are in the whole development or of the growth and everything. And guys, for you, as I always tell you at the end of the episode, now go back to the beginning and listen and stop wherever you think that you need to stop. Write down things, visit Casey's profile, send him a message, ask him questions, visit the ActiveCampaign website, and always keep it funky. That's the ultimate advice. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.